Everybody ought to hold to his hand. Hold on to my God's unchanging. Everybody ought to hold on to my God unchanging hand. You ought to build your hopes on things that are eternal, my Lord. Everybody ought to hold on to God's unchanging hand. Everybody ought to hold to his hand. Hold on to my God's unchanging. Everybody ought to hold on to my God's unchanging hand. I know you can build, come on tenors, things eternal. Hey Lord, everybody ought to hold on to God's unchanging hand. Well, you know time is filled with sweet transition. Yes it is now. No other than move can't stand. Oh, you wanna build your hopes on things. Everybody hold on to God's unchanging hand. Everybody ought to. If you want to make it, you got to hold to God's unchanging hand. You gotta hold on to my God's unchanging hand. You ought to build your hopes on the things eternal. Everybody ought to hold on to God's unchanging hand. Well, now when you're dirty, come on, get on up and sing. If to God, yeah, but to God, you have been, you know fair and bright that a home in glory. One day that you're in a rapture soul. That's the reason I ain't gonna let go of my God's unchanging. Take a hand, I'm gonna hold to his hand, hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Oh, whole thing, Lord, that's a mighty long time, but hold on. I gotta say one more thing. Listen, you know I wouldn't be a sinner. Oh, I'll tell you the reason why. Lord, I'm afraid God in heaven just might wanna call my name, y'all. And I would not be ready to die. That's the reason. Oh yeah. I'm gonna, you oughta hold on.
Come on, brothers. Hey, all the brothers got a hold to God. Everybody ought to be. Everybody got a hold to God. Hey, and the preacher's got a and the leaders got a y'all all leaders, yeah. Listen, everybody ought to
time we gotta hold on to his hand. Never, never let go of God. Unchanging hand. Hold on to his hand. You gotta hold on. It's a wonderful hand. It's a mighty hand. Gotta be it's a wonderful hand. It's a loving hand. A caring hand. On things eternal. And it's wonderful. It won't ever stop.